Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Calling Within podcast. Today I've got Nikki Slade here with me. Nikki is an international pioneering natural voice coach, and she's also a Kirtan leader. Nikki, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Veronica. Really, really honored to be here.
Me too. It's going to be such an exciting conversation. I've attended a couple of your Kirtans that you've led in London, and they were just so incredible and touching, and I was dancing, and there was just something magical happening to me. And I'm now so excited to kind of pick your brain a little bit about the rationale for how those kirtans are done and what effect it has from almost like a nerdy theoretical perspective, if you wish. So yeah, I'm super excited for that.
Well, we're all vibrational beings, and when we chant, we're really coming back to our true nature, which is a primordial resonance within. You could say when we chant, we remember our true nature, which is at one with everyone and everything. And so it's a very natural place to be. And the irony is we've already arrived. It's just that we don't always experience that because of the fluctuations of the mind. We're conditioned very often away from that experience of inner connection. But yeah, we are in essence vibrational beings. So when we remember to tap into that, we at the same time remember who we truly are.
Wow. And we're going to unpack all of this one by one. But before we go there, I'd like to ask you some questions about your background. And I'm wondering, so you've mentioned you were an actor actually before we started doing this podcast. How did you discover chanting, and why was it chanting specifically that drew your attention?
Very good. So I was a seeker. Now they say you live your life forward, but you understand it backwards. So I was definitely looking for something, a bit like what the Tiggers like best in the Winnie the Pooh books. When I was a kid, the only thing that made sense to me was singing freely. I would find songs that I loved and then I'd go and sing them in nature, and I'd imagine orchestras coming out of the trees and everybody around me joining in. That was my biggest joy, that possibility. And the place where I could see that actually happening was in musicals, and I used to go and see quite a few musicals when I was a young child, because actually my uncle was a musical composer, and so I would go and see his shows when I was a child, and I'd see people singing and dancing on stage, and that seemed to make a lot of sense to me. But I didn't realize that really I had a greater calling inside to come home to the song in my soul. But the theatre and singing there was the closest thing I could find to it. And so from when I was a child, I thought, well, that's what I want to do. And I auditioned for drama school. I went to the Guildford School of Acting between 18 and 21 and was doing what supposedly I loved to do. And I did love it. And there was always this sense that there was something missing inside, that kind of losing myself, pretending to be somebody else and in roles, just seemed like an escape in a way, but not a homecoming. And so I had this yearning really within. And I'm very candid in my book, in fact, that in my early years, in my teens through to about the age of 27, I tried to find that connection through the path of addiction, which I think is very, very common in our world. And got kind of lost in that for a bit. And then in 1987, I was in a West End show, a musical called The Mystery of Edwin Drood. And I was in the ensemble, and I was understudy to two leading actors. And both of them, interestingly enough, like way back in the 80s, had a chanting practice, and I was fascinated by this. My goodness, what is this chanting thing that they're doing? And they both had such a light in their eyes and such a joy that I wanted to learn more. So one of the actors, I asked her, I said, how can I learn more about this? And so she told me where to go, and I went along, and I was amazed by it. It was all very unusual to me, sort of burning incense and kind of atmosphere of repeating mantras that I'd never done in my life, but somehow I felt good. And I purchased a cassette, it was in those days, of one of the chants. And I was between acting jobs, and I was working in a deli. And I lived not far from the deli, and I couldn't wait to go back in the lunch hour and chant, because it was having such a wonderful effect on my being. And the amazing thing is that when I started chanting, the desire to use addiction, like alcohol, stimulants, drugs, anything like that, just left me. It was really amazing, and I felt filled from within. And I had a spontaneous awakening, if you will, like a descent of grace, where my true nature revealed itself to me. I mean, I talk about this at length in the book, but one particular example that was very poignant was when I was walking in Battersea Park one day, and I suddenly had this euphoric feeling of unity consciousness, of oneness. There was literally no separation. I had no fear of anyone, and I literally felt like I could go up to anyone like they were my own very long lost self. And I felt like I was singing, and I really did feel like I was in the universal orchestra of my childhood. And I thought, this is it. This is what Tiggers, this is what Nikki likes best. This is true. This is real. And I fell in love with the practice of Kirtan. And I just wanted to do it all the time. And as I chanted more and more, I started to have revelations of a new purpose in my life, which was to create spaces where people, including myself, could explore their true nature and could explore their real path with voice as the signature tune to find their way. Because I had experienced a sense of being very lost in sort of previous programming, familial programming, programming in my school, programming at college, and then societal programming that you've got to be successful, you've got to fulfill an ambition. And all of it felt really dry, and I realized that so many thousands of people were lost in this, and it was just like a really, really strong calling to create what I called voice circles at the time. And I decided to open my first voice circle in 1990, and it was in a space opposite Brixton Prison. And I announced that I was opening the circle and that we were going to be chanting and doing overtone harmonics as well, because I was quite interested in that, and we just explore how that went. And people really came. They loved it. It was like a kind of almost like an underground movement in those days. Like, we better not tell too many people what we're doing on a Wednesday evening. And people would bring food to share at the end. We'd make all these sounds and we'd chant mantras, and people felt amazing. And it was clearly such a source of joy for people that when I started to be invited to go away and act in theatres outside of London, I really had to think twice, because I thought, this is going to compromise what felt like a really strong soul purpose. So in 1997, I played my very last role in the theatre, and it was a great role, and I got to fulfill all the things I was good at. And then I kind of knew, certainly for then, that my time as an actor was kind of complete. And I haven't gone back to it since. I wouldn't say never, because you just never know. But it was kind of done, and I knew that my full-time vocation was going to be sharing the path of the natural voice. And so with these voice circles, I started to do them in North and South London initially, and people would come and they really enjoyed it. And I would always chant Kirtan as part of it. It wasn't for the whole session, though. We would explore other things through voice, through movement, through all sorts of experimentation. And then somebody one day said, have you thought about just doing a Kirtan group? I mean, I love the voice work as well, but I would love to come and just chant for a whole hour. And I thought, that's an interesting idea. So I took her up on it. And as well as my workshops, I started a weekly Kirtan. And it was down in Teddington, in sort of towards Richmond, Twickenham way, where I live. And lots of people came. They loved it. And at that same venue annually, we did a big chant by candlelight for winter solstice. And over the years, I mean, I remember sort of back in the early 2000s, we were getting like 300 to 400 people for that solstice night. And it was very kind of underground in those days, really, the whole sort of Kirtan movement in London. Obviously not within the Krishna consciousness movement or in Hindu temples, but I just mean in terms of Westerners as a whole, it was little known. So, yeah, it was a very amazing time. I remember a couple of people saying, "I'm really enjoying this, but is it witchcraft?" I mean, I mean, those were the kind of questions that would come at me in those days. I remember, and we used to do these candlelight nights for street children in Peru. It was a charity event. And so we were rehearsing in a church one day. It was a Baptist church. And oh my God, we were told that we couldn't rehearse there because people were so kind of like, what is this strange thing? And now, of course, I mean, in 2024, chanting Kirtan, chanting mantras, is everywhere. I mean, it's been really big in America for quite a while now, but it's now boomed into the UK and the rest of Europe. And we're getting to the stage which I predicted would happen. I made a video, gosh, about 15 years ago, and I said, mark my word, Kirtan will be on every street corner. It'll be exactly the same as asana, as yoga. Everybody, even if you don't do yoga, everybody knows what it is, or they have an idea of what it is. And I really firmly know and believe that there will be Kirtan cafes, there will be Kirtan in every company to warm up the teams. I mean, by the time my generation are dead and gone, I mean, it's just like, oh yeah, chanting, yeah, absolutely, it's normal. It's just like drinking purified water. It's like, of course we would chant. So it has been a privilege being on the pioneering end of sharing what is ostensibly a beautiful practice that comes from Mother India and has been part of that sacred journey of actually the poet-saint movement, that early bhakti of the 7th century, where meditators found the bliss of the inner self and they wrote of their experiences in poetry and song, those waves of bliss, and just shared it with just people in the streets, and people would sing along. And it wasn't academic. It was very much about the heart, about pure love, pure devotion and sharing. And so really, I feel what we're all doing now, those of us who have the privilege to lead, really, it's about carrying on that good news, that movement. And I think what I'm really passionate about is all religious barriers coming down, that everyone has their own sacred path, religion, tradition, but yet let there not be a barrier. Let there be a space where we can all come together and we can connect to our own pull of what we love, our own denomination, with an understanding that as we chant the names, we're really appealing to the vibrational patterning, the different colours of the rainbow of the divine. And if a name is going to get in the way of that, then please, in your heart and mind, replace that name with that which has the greatest impact for you. I think that's really important in this time, because We've been for centuries in such a shocking mess in the name of the politicized aspect of religion that I think Kirtan can do and is already beginning to do an enormous amount for bringing people together in the heart of love, in the vibration of love. And it's very private how people actually relate to that, whether it's the tradition of childhood that they love. But I think it's time we create environments for oneness.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. So many follow-up questions in there. And you've mentioned so many incredible things that I would love to touch on with you. Things like the true nature, the vibrations of the Kirtan, opening the heart, and the states of consciousness of pure love and unity. And I truly wish that upon everyone, that they experience even the tiniest glimpse of that love and that unity consciousness that you were talking about. Because once you get a taste of that, nothing else that's earthly that is considered to give you pleasure will not even compare to that. Things like chocolate or stimulants or anything that you can think of that our society chases as a numbing mechanism. And also, when you were talking about your true purpose, I could really resonate with that. Because I feel like so many of us are lacking purpose in life. We don't understand why we're doing things. We are lost. We don't know what we're supposed to do. But yet, because we're so disconnected, it's harder for us to actually tap into the energy of the purpose, because that energy and that intuition comes when we're calm, when we're relaxed, when we're in tune. But we're so bombarded by different things that are bringing us away from that we can never truly discover it unless we go back in with intention to discover it. So I'm so happy to hear that that is how your journey was. And when you were mentioning that you were born into a family of musicians and people who were quite involved in that, it really made me think it's funny how the universe had put you into this family specifically to discover this beautiful practice. And I truly believe that everything happens for a reason. And to me, that really sounded like this perfect path that was laid out for you to follow it. And that's so wonderful that you did follow it.
It's interesting that you say that. Yeah, I think that's really true. I think particularly the reason I did stuff in the theatre in the early part of my life is that my higher self knew that I needed to have practice in being in front of, well, we call it an audience in the theatre. It's different with Kirtan, it's a Sangam, it's the community. However, you have to be able to get out of the way of yourself to be able to be a conduit for that practice. And so if you have practice in having done that for years and years and years of stepping out in front of people and just being about offering whatever it is, the talent, the gift, then it was almost like the inner wisdom knew that I would need that later on. Because in the pioneering sense, I've been invited since the early 2000s into quite mainstream arenas, like, for example, being invited to chant in business conferences, which is really out there, really. I mean, and people who are not necessarily into the practice or they don't know until they do it, and to be able to be in front of that kind of crowd and not get thrown, I think that training I had was tremendously helpful. And again, I've also done Glastonbury Festival back in 2019, not on the huge main stage, but in a mainstream area. And again, when you're going into those environments where it hasn't actually been shared as a practice before, certainly not in a mainstream area, you have to be able to listen to where the public are at and to be able to speak in a way that is accessible, particularly in the delivery, particularly in the introduction and how you share it, I think is really, really important. Another festival I did was Latitude, which is quite a well-known rock festival, those who don't know. Beautiful stage called the Waterfront Stage. And again, it was a big gamble, but I'm used to stages, you see, so that all helped. And then it was very magical. As we started, there were people coming, appearing, hundreds of them on the bridge and sitting on the banks. And I definitely think that practice of being in audiences with sort of lights and staging, not that Kirtan is about a performance. However, if you're used to those kind of stages, then that element doesn't throw you so much. So I think that's true.
That's amazing. And I sometimes wonder what the universe is preparing me for, because it told me to do the podcast. But I guess we'll see about that.
Yes. I mean, who knows? You might be the next Oprah or something.
We'll see.
Yeah.
When it comes to different spiritual practices, how is Kirtan unique in terms of what it does to the body and the soul and the energetics? Because I feel like a lot of the various practices like meditation, yoga, pranayama, they all influence the vibrations and they all, in a sense, bring us back to our true nature, our soul. But what is it about Kirtan that is different compared to them?
Well, I think what I love about Kirtan, and I think many would agree, is that it's not so much about technique. It's about intention. It's about devotion. It's about love. It's about trusting that there is a divine presence in our heart that is listening all the time. What name you have for it, whether it's Allah, whether it's Krishna, whether it's Jesus, whether it's the ocean, the rocks, the rivers. But it is that faithfulness that as you cry out in your chant to reconnect, you are heard. And the pull of that call starts to take you back to where you already are through the practice. So it bypasses anything that's conceptual, anything that's about a very rigorous discipline, but it does require a full surrender and a full faithfulness, not in a religious sense, but in a complete trust that I am that. I am one with the divine. And of course, it's the divine principle of our own understanding. It's interesting because I've worked for 25 years with recovering addicts, obviously close to my own heart from my youth. And they all say that this is a much easier way to meditate. Many of them find going into still meditation in 12-step recovery, the 11th step is conscious contact through meditation. And they say they find that really, really challenging. But having mantra, instrument of the mind, having that, it gives the mind like a ladder to climb, whilst the sweet vibrations of the chant start to, through alchemy, shift any tensions that are in our heart or in our emotional body. The purification can happen. So in other words, it's like once you put your clothes or your laundry into the washing machine, you trust that the cycle is washing it. You don't sit there and analyze, how is this washing machine doing this? And for me, it's like that with Kirtan. It's like the wisdom knows what to do. The wisdom intuitively knows what we need. And so sometimes we'll go straight to the bliss because encouragement, a little window of hope, suddenly we get the darshan of our own inner self. And then other days, the grunge is being cleaned up. Maybe there's some of the thieves of the heart that need cleansing out, like frustration maybe, judgment, irritability. These are things that are not comfortable. However, the chant will go to the place that is most constricted and is actually the barrier. Low self-worth, that's a huge thing that so many people suffer from. So that might come up intensely before it washes through. But then if we can stay with it, then we have the blessing of those beautiful waves of bliss that come if we're willing to go through.
That is so interesting you say that, because actually on the last Kirtan that I went to, for me it started off with bliss. And my favorite mantra for some reason is Sitaram or Hariram Sitaram. I don't know what it is about the mantra. And that was the first mantra that was played in Kirtan, and I was so happy and I was so blissful. But then in the second mantra, I can't quite remember which one that was, but I kind of had this depressive moment.
Yeah.
And I was just suddenly like so preoccupied with the burden of existence. And I was like, why is this happening to me during Kirtan when I'm supposed to be blissful? And I was sort of like half participating because I was so preoccupied by this thing. And then I've dealt with this. I was like, actually, it's a choice. Like I can choose to focus on that, but I can also choose to focus on the good bits. And I kind of went back into it. So it's funny you mentioned that we need to go and almost ride those waves of emotion and different things that come up. And ultimately what ended up happening for me, it ended on a good note. And I think it lasted about 2 hours or something. And it felt like it was an hour. And I came out of there and I thought, how was it 2 hours? It simultaneously felt like a long and a short time at the same time. And then I realized I must have been in some sort of weird trance state when I was singing or when I was participating in there. And what do you think that is? Like when we get so immersed in the practice that we either start crying or we start dancing or we think like the time is stopping or passing too quickly. What does it do to our bodies?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you should say that, because actually last week I was chanting with some people who have struggled with addiction, and one of the things with the dis-ease of addiction is it's very much about keeping up a defense, not feeling our feelings, that kind of inner struggle, and that through the effect of the mantra and the chanting, some of them literally tears were pouring down their faces and they couldn't believe that they hadn't been able to control that. They'd actually let the Shakti or the energy of the chant dispel that tension, that rock that they'd been holding on to. And I think really logic is not the place to go, but I would suggest that what happened to you was you touched your own inner self. You went to the heart of yourself. So there's tears of joy when we come home. It's like the Wizard of Oz. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. There is a center right in the heart that is infinitely free, infinitely blissful. And when we touch it, we just know. We cry for joy. Or when we're appealing to go home, the inner self says, well, Nikki, you better deal with that character trait. I'm going to bring out that. And so hence you get a storm cloud for a moment that needs to be brought into view, to be released, to bid it farewell. So yeah, it's, to me, I'm sure there are scientists that would go, yeah, but that's the da-di-da-di-da. I just trust that the beloved within knows. And once we touch that place, it's almost like all the questions stop.
Wow, that is so beautiful. And I'm not really too much into science, but I'm a bit of a nerd and I've got a big intellectual side. And I know that the listeners will want to know kind of the mechanics of it, almost from like a somewhat theoretical, maybe spiritual perspective. And especially for people that are not necessarily religious or believe in God or the divine or really anything. What is actually like happening on a spiritual, energetic, or chakra level when we chant Kirtan? So you've mentioned before going back to our true nature and touching the inner self, which I assume you're talking about the Atma in the yogic philosophy.
Yeah, the soul.
Yeah, but what is actually happening? So how does like Kirtan open everything up on a spiritual level?
Well, I think, again, it's intention. Intention is really, really key to that, because when you have the longing, as I say, the listening of that which we cannot touch, that we cannot see, which is the soul, starts revealing itself. And we're made of sound. We are made of millions of vibrations. And so there are higher frequencies and there are lower frequencies. So in the same way that if we focus on a negative mantra, like it's never going to happen, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, yada, yada, yada. Haven't you noticed we go into quite a dense state of being, like we're walking around with a sack of rocks on our backs? So the same is true, that if you focus on the higher vibrations of love, and the thing is, the Sanskrit mantras in and of themselves is not what actually shifts our state. It is our intention that brings the purifying aspect of those mantras into action. Really, the Sanskrit mantra in and of itself, without devotion, is a shell. But because so much devotion has been poured into these mantras, and so much faith and so much love, yes, we can tap into a bigger field, a lineage that's gone beforehand. However, without our own longing, without our own devotion, the mantra can only become alive when we have that longing. If you go in dryly and say the same words, it might not have any effect at all. So here's the big thing that does it, and this is the answer to your question really, it's transmission. So when the transmission is potently connected, when the vehicle through which the mantra is coming is wholly devoted, and the intention is that people are touched, that's what the chanter is actually receiving. And not every vehicle or mantra leader, kirtan leader, is everybody's cup of tea, so to speak. This is why you could be listening on a recording to somebody who's chanting a particular mantra. It might be Krishna Das, for example, and suddenly the tears are rolling down your face and you're like, oh my gosh. But it's because there's something in his resonance that is deeply touching your soul. But for somebody else, they might go, what? No, it's when I listen to Jayutal. And it's to do with the transmission and also where each soul is at, like which particular frequency of sound is emanating from the leader. So for example, Krishna consciousness, the devotion, the pull of devotion, you say you've been to Om Nom, it's very Krishna focused, isn't it? People who are literally resonating with Krishna consciousness will be pulled there. That strange pull of what they love. It's irresistible to go to Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. So, whereas for Gandhi chanted Ram, 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 not Lord Rama, but just the syllable Ram, was his way in to that state. So, if anything, it's the resonance, it's the vibration on the cellular system of the body, like a symphony of music. But the missing thing often is devotion and transmission. But bring those two elements together and then Kirtan is really happening.
Wow, so many incredible things there. And I can relate when you mentioned, like, when I listen to Krishna Das, and I've really discovered him recently, I really feel this energy that I don't feel compared to a regular pop song that I listen to.
That's it.
It's just so obvious to me that he energetically transmits something through his chanting, and that's still there through each time I play it. It's just always there. And it's not going to be picked up by, well, anything technological. I don't exactly know how it works, but surely like there's some probably like mini vibrations of devotion or something that makes it very different to a regular song that I listen to. And it's just so obvious to me, and I really get lost in that. And I guess because I'm not a kirtan leader, but I participate, how do I and other people that want to participate and sing along in a kirtan, how do they cultivate this devotion? How can they cultivate this relationship with the mantra that implies devotion?
I would say that when you go to kirtan, set the intention, let me connect with the highest love, and then drop all attachment to that happening, because then what happens, we get analytical and we go through the whole thing saying, yeah, but it's not happening. Whereas it will happen in the ripened, it's about being ripe, when the fruit is ripe, and it'll come out of nowhere. So funnily enough, there was a guy who came to a group I was running in an addiction treatment center, and this particular guy, he was American, funnily enough, he couldn't stand chanting. It used to really aggravate him, like it was his least favorite session, because I think he would probably admit he had a lot of stuff going on. But funnily enough, at the ripened moment, he discovered Krishna Das, and he had an overwhelming emotional connection to KD leading, and he's a complete convert to the practice now. Now, is that because when he came to my session it was failing? Absolutely not. It's like, I've had this very often. I've had people who've said, I would rather have tax over my eyes than chant, and then they come 5 years later and say, I've been looking to come back. I now get it. And then they love it. You see, but if we've got a lot of barriers up and a lot of resistance and sadness, I mean, sometimes if one is carrying a lot of sadness and then suddenly a practice is knocking on the door and saying, let me in, it can be very scary to be faced with the possibility of your heart unlocking and all of that you've been holding on to coming to the surface. So I think ask, seek, and ye shall find. And also I think people are shown their teacher, and we don't necessarily have the same teacher forever, but sometimes you'll be led to a particular teacher who leads the practice where you go, this is where my heart's resonating right now.
Wow, so many beautiful things there. And yeah, for me, that was actually the case for a long time. I used to go to the Krishna Consciousness Kirtan, and there was really just the Maha Mantra. And for me, I really went through a journey of my relationship with Kirtan from there, because in the beginning, I kind of liked it. I didn't really get it. And then I was looking at the monks, and they were just always so ecstatic. And I was like, I'm not there. I don't know why. What am I doing? Like, it's not working for me. And I ended up leaving and not really going to the kirtan anymore because I didn't really get the point. And then I started going to your kirtan, and that unlocked something in me, because there we also tried different mantras. And for some reason, I could really relate to other mantras better. And now I really get this pull to just do kirtan in my room by myself. I just chant along with Krishna Das or some other mantras. And more so, I prefer this to my normal meditation and stillness, because my mind is restless. Perhaps this is just what I need, and it does the job for me. So I can totally relate that for some people in the moment, that might not be the thing, but then something will lead them back to it, and actually it will be so beneficial and so ecstatic that if somebody had told me this a year ago, I would be like, no way, never. Classic. Now it's happening.
Yeah.
And it's been a wonderful lesson and a wonderful journey, and I'm just, so thankful to the universe that it led me back to Kirtan, because it really does wonders. I really don't know, how precisely. I don't know if anybody does, but it's just incredible. Yeah.
I think it brings me back to what I was saying at the beginning of, I think it's so important in this time to have a space where people of all faiths and all traditions can come together, and absolute reverence for all the ways. So there's two different types of devotion. One is saguna worship and one is nirguna. And saguna worship is very much like Krishna consciousness. It's a beautiful thing where you have one form of devotion and it's Krishna all the way. And if that's your path, that's a beautiful and ecstatic way of coming home to the beloved. For others, so for example, if you look in the history, like in the Sikh tradition, Guru Nanak, for example, nirguna devotion, no specific form, just a straight connection to the vibration of the divine in the heart through just maybe one syllable, one word. And then there's a mid-range, which is very much where I sit, where we can explore multiple chants. Om Namah Shivaya, Kali Durga, Namo Namah, Sri Ram Jai Ram, Om Bhagavan, Jai Jai Bhagavan, where we are appealing to many names, but going from through the name to the nameless, through the form to the formless. So for a moment, it helps to have the anchor of Durga, this powerful warrior goddess riding a tiger, who's helping us connect to the vibrational patterning of fearlessness. So this is where I think it gets essential, is that we're chanting into the different aspects of one divine rainbow, different qualities of the divine. So fearlessness being one, that's what I need today. I'm going to chant Kali Durga Namo Namah. I need to lighten up. What would help me with that? Sri Ram Jai Ram, very joyous, very light. I need to connect with my creativity and my expression. Saraswati, the river of Saras, the flow. So we might chant Saraswati mantras. But you see what I'm saying? Appealing to the vibrational patterning of that mantra, as opposed to going, well, this means that I'm now following the Hindu religion. And you might. And for many people who are devout Hindus, fabulous. This is, you see, there is no wrong or right way. I just think it's important that everybody gets to choose how they're relating to the name in the sacredness of their own heart and mind, so that it's accessible. So I've had all different faiths and religions in my Kirtan groups over the years, and people, I think, in the main, feel comfortable enough to find their own way. And I say to some people who are really devout, so perhaps devout Christians or devout Muslims, and I say, look, the important thing is that you can be here and feel at ease. So if you want to repeat Om Namah Christe, for example, if you want to chant Allah, 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 please do. It's not about coming and being told what to be faithful to. I think only the individual can know that. And this is why some environments suit others better than other environments. But they're not wrong or right. It's just where your pull is.
Yeah, I guess another thing I wanted to touch on is the actual meaning of the chants, because my understanding is we are saluting different forms of the divine, and most of the mantras are in Sanskrit. So for some reason, for example, the Hare Krishna mantra, we are kind of saluting and we are devotionally, I guess, serving to Krishna, and Hare Ram, it's again about Ram, but we're kind of pouring different names of God, the different manifestations of God in those mantras. Did I get that right? And if not, then what is actually the meaning of them?
So I'm not speaking for Krishna consciousness, so I can only speak from where I'm coming toward it and from where I've practiced in my past, is that we're always chanting to the same one. There's not two. I am that. Soham, Hamsa is the mantra that's going on all the time within. It's the only mantra that's going on inaudibly. It's there in the breath. And so in simplicity, that's what we are. And then there are the different colors of that rainbow of Soham. So it isn't that when you're chanting, for example, to Lakshmi, you're chanting to a separate god or goddess. You're actually invoking the aspect of Soham, of the inner self, that is beauty, that is abundance. In any faith and any tradition, isn't the Lord beautiful and abundant and prosperous? In any faith or tradition, isn't the Lord powerful, creative, sustaining? Isn't the Lord fearless? And so really the forms and the iconography of all the different ways we can look at how the divine principle might look are only there to help us go back in. Yeah.
Wow. And for example, with Om mantra, how does that differentiate to other mantras? Because I always feel like Om is kind of the original or the universal sound of everything. How does it differ compared to when we chant Hari Ram or something like that?
Well, you kind of said it. It's like, in the end, it's like, say if all the gold bracelets in the world were then melted down back to gold, you'd have gold as gold as gold. But we're here to co-create with the Creator. We are that. And so it's kind of fun to create different qualities. Lakshmi likes to create beauty. I mean, there's a wonderful yoga philosopher, Christopher Harish Wallace. You could say that Lakshmi's in all the beautiful boutiques, and she's in all the crystals, and she's in all the designer stores in some ways. That's an aspect of Lakshmi. But at the end of the day, all of that one day will dissolve back into. So, yeah, I mean, we could go there by chanting, I say just Om. Om is. And as we go through daily life, because we are in a play of consciousness, we feel we need different aspects to deal with different situations that we face. So if you're in extreme fear, you feel like you want a fiery side of your inner self to move through that. Maybe Om feels too zen in that moment. But yeah, there's so many paradoxes, isn't there?
Yeah. And for people who haven't practiced Kirtan before, can you explain the difference between practicing in a group setting versus, for example, if somebody just wants to try for themselves in the room? I would imagine there is a difference in terms of vibrations and in terms of the collective power of chanting.
Yeah. Well, it's funny actually, because I started chanting with many people around me, but actually my most profound moment, as I said, was when I bought this tape cassette and I was going through a sort of dark night of the soul, and then I put this tape on and I started having these profound awakenings. So I can't say prescriptively you must be in a big crowd of people to have the best experience. However, it is an absolutely exquisite experience to be with hundreds of people chanting. You really do experience that unity of everybody's sound is coming together and that pure love. So I think if you're miles away from any kirtan that's going on, like nobody's doing it in your area, I would say the best thing to do is to listen on YouTube to different leaders, try out different mantras, and see, as you chant along with it, how it feels. And then if you are in a neighborhood that there's a kirtan going on, you can always Google it. If you happen to be going into nearer a city that may have a kirtan going on, then go and check it out. But it's not that you have to be in a group to start, because I certainly wasn't in my personal practice.
For the fellow spiritual seekers, and given you've had your incredible spiritual journey, What are your sort of top 3 lessons that you've learned along the way that you want others to take away?
Whoa, that's wonderful. So it's funny you didn't give me that in advance. So you mean just through the path, the 3 top things I've learned?
Yeah, and the top 3 lessons that you want others to take away from
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Okay, let me think about that. Well, one of my favorite films is The Truman Show. Have you ever seen The Truman Show?
No.
Well, if you haven't, then I recommend it. It's with Jim Carrey, and he's born on a stage set and doesn't know he's on a stage set, like in a TV show. But as he grows up on this TV, something's not quite right. It's like this drama's not real. Anyway, he eventually finds the edge of the TV set, which is a screen, and then there's the real ocean beyond it. It's almost like he tears the screen, and it's like, that's what I've learned through this practice, that we are not the drama. This is a play, literally, that I'm literally playing a character in a play. And who I am at the end of the day is not Nikki. I am the self expressing itself through Nikki. And the days I'm happiest is when I remember that and I connect to that. And Kirtan is the key to, just like Jim Carrey in The Truman Show, of not being stuck in the soap opera of the play. So that's a very big thing that I have learned, and I have to continue learning, because it's staying in that state is obviously the name of the game. What else have I learned? That there is a power to master any thief of the heart, any inner enemy can be overcome through taking on the battlefield of the mind by using the power of mantra to choose what mantras dominate my thinking during the day. We all have default mantras, I don't have to say what they are, that drag us down. And so that mastery of the mind is a choice, and it's about being vigilant that that power of light, that power of love is more powerful than those dark voices. And the biggest thing I think I've learned, and I'm still learning, is that the real success in life is not how many accolades or how many things you've achieved or how many medals you get, a bit like the Wizard of Oz, but it's about coming home inside and being of service and remembering that we're all truly here to serve that greater power within, and that may not look anything like we thought it would look. And if I can remember that first, then I've lived a good day.
Wow, that is incredible. Thank you very much for sharing. And for those who are interested, where can people find you and how can they learn more about Kirtan?
So, over the last 6 years, I've run 6 200-hour Learn to Lead Kirtan trainings. So I'm very happy to have facilitated for 108 leaders, which is a good number, to go out in the world and share the practice. So for people who want to learn to lead, at the moment I'm not running the 200-hour, but I am running immersion courses. So there's one starting at the end of April at a beautiful yoga centre called the Lodge Space in Canada Water. It's over 6 Sundays. So if people are really curious they've done some kirtan, but they want to share it with others, that's coming up soon. I come, where you came, I have Tri Yoga on a Saturday night. Every Saturday at Tri Yoga Camden, I lead in person, face-to-face, 6:30 to 7:45. It's not a huge gathering, but it's a beautiful, intimate gathering, and we come and connect to whatever our understanding of the divine. And then I also work privately with people. I work empowering people to connect to their lives through mantra and to use the power of vibration to have your best life on a one-to-one basis. And then festivals. I tend to do things like the World Yoga Festival in the summer and Tribal Earth, and wherever I'm invited. I'm doing another one in Beaconsfield in July, so the festival season is always good. And then if you're somebody who works in an organization and would like a team build, I've done many team builds for companies and things, bringing people together through the mantras, yes, but also through some natural voice processes that I do that help people to connect on the court where it counts. Yeah, so that NikkiSlade.com is the website. And I also have a book, The Healing Power of Chanting, and several chanting CDs now. They're on iTunes and Spotify, so you can find me there.
Wow. Nikki, it's been an honor. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing.
Oh, no, thank you.
Thank you.
Veronica. And thank you for what you're doing. Thank you.